and going to Colorado for school and then going back to Massachusetts, I had no idea that you didn't have to have winter. So this is my first opportunity to realize that, hey, it's a free country and you actually don't have to have winter. So that was a wonderful thing for me to experience. And that was, again, my first opportunity to really fall in love with Arizona. When I was in pilot training, it was against the law for women to be fighter pilots. This law was created after many women who served amazingly since the beginning of our country and our fight for our freedom. Yes, sir. Thank you. Many women had served, how's that? Through the World War II era and just done amazing things. But in 1947, when women were formally integrated into the military, they were no longer allowed to be pilots even. When we had these women served as women Air Force service pilots during World War II, they were just amazing pioneers that really opened the door for people like me. But then they were told basically no more opportunity to be pilots in 1947. So they didn't allow women actually pilots again until about 1980. Women weren't allowed in the Air Force Academy until 1976. And so when they allowed women to be pilots, they said, the law basically said women can't be fighter pilots or bomber pilots. So I went through the Air Force Academy and I went through pilot training, and it was still against the law regardless of how I flew. It didn't matter what your order of merit was, you just couldn't be a fighter pilot. When I heard that at the Academy, I just decided that I was going to be a fighter pilot, and I had absolutely nothing to do with anything changing, but I was just sort of, it's the fiber of who I am, and if somebody tells me I can't do something, I get really motivated to do it. And so I just would walk around as a young cadet saying, I'm going to be one of the first women fighter pilots, and everyone would laugh at me, and I'm like, they say it's against the law. I said, well, we live in a democracy, laws change, the law's going to change, and I'm going to be ready to go. So having, again, nothing to do with me, I was in pilot training when the law changed. And Desert Storm happened, the law was overturned, and then women were no longer restricted to be fighter pilots, but the Pentagon still didn't allow us to be. So I graduated from there, and I chose to go off and be an instructor pilot for a few years in Del Rio, Texas, because I thought policy is going to change soon. I want to keep building my airmanship. I want to keep building my experience. Fly upside down and pull G's and fly in formation and do all the things you need to be ready and postured when the policy changes. And I was in the right place at the right time in 1993 when the policy changed, and they had identified 7 of us in the Air Force, 7 women who had graduated at the top of our class and earned a fighter assignment but just couldn't go basically because of our gender. So I was in that first group of 7 women to become fighter pilots in the Air Force. I had the privilege to be the first to fly in combat in 1995 in U.S. history, and then later on I had the privilege to be the first to command a fighter squadron also in combat. I brought my squadron over to Afghanistan in 2005-2006. I first came to Tucson in 1994. I selected the A-10 Warthog, the world's best close air support aircraft. That is just an amazing airplane that you see flying out of Davis-Monthan, and Davis-Monthan is the home of the A-10. And I selected the A-10 over the F-15, the F-15E, the F-16, and the F-111. I had basically a choice of all those aircraft, but I selected the A-10. How many veterans were Army or Marines in the crowd? To me, it was just doing the Lord's work, and just such an important mission that when Americans are on the ground, under fire, and needing close air support, to be in that position to be able to show up and do what we can in order to have them live to fight another day and come home to their families. There was nothing more rewarding. So I selected the A-10, and I came to Davis-Monthan in 1994. That's when I fell in love with Southwest Arizona, fell in love with Tucson, just totally fell in love with the place here. I bought my home in Rita Ranch in 1994, and I was privileged to have back-to-back assignments here in that time frame. Normally you spend 2 to 3 years somewhere as an officer, but when I finished my tour in the operational squadron, I was selected to be the first woman to become an A-10 instructor pilot. So I then moved over to the training squadron, and I spent another 3 years as an instructor pilot here. So I spent almost 5 years here, my first stint in Tucson, which is very lucky. I then was selected as a legislative fellow, one of 7 in the Air Force, selected instead of going off to command and staff school. I got to go work on Capitol Hill for a year. And I was very privileged to work for Senator John Kyle. So of all the 535 members of Congress that I could work for, I worked for John Kyle for a year. So I still was able, even though I was focusing a lot on national defense issue, national security issues, foreign relations issue, I still was fighting for
veterans and the military bases and all the defense issues here in Arizona while I was on his staff. So I did that for a year. I then was sent over to Saudi Arabia, and then I actually came back to Tucson for another 5 years after Saudi Arabia. You may remember me from my time in Saudi Arabia that I took on the Pentagon for making our women wear Muslim garb whenever they were off base in Saudi Arabia. And I know, again, for those who serve in the military, it's a very long story. This is like an 8-year story. And I know it's very much of our culture to, you know, not make waves and just, you know, accept, do what you're told and, you know, support the chain of command, and I get all that. But, you know, as an officer, my oath is to the Constitution of the United States only, and we are guardians and protectors of that Constitution. And from the first day I entered the Air Force Academy, I was told, hey, moral courage and leadership means if you think something's wrong, you stand up against it, you do your part, regardless of what the personal cost may be, that you stand up against it. And so this story is a very long story of 5 years before this. 5 years before this, I was trying to get this policy changed. I discovered, even though I was told it was a State Department diplomatic policy, it actually wasn't, because I learned, you know, whenever I think something's wrong, I do my homework, I figure out, is it law, is it policy, where is it written down, who's the signature block on it, where did it come from, when's the last time it was reviewed, you know, just do your homework if you're trying to get something changed, right? So I went on this little discovery mission when I was trying to get this policy changed on behalf of the troops that it applied to in Saudi Arabia. It actually never applied to me. For 5 years I tried to get this thing changed, and I realized it was not a State Department policy. It was not even a Department of Defense policy. It was only a local 2-star general's policy that sort of took on a life of its own over the years, and what I would call bureaucratic policy creep. You guys all know what I'm talking about who served, you know, where it just gets handed down and it gets more and more ridiculous. And then everybody defends it to the death, and they think it's above their pay grade when they're asked. And so as I spent 5 years doing this, when I got to the point where I realized it was only the 2-star general's policy is when I got orders to go over there. And so this whole thing kind of came to a head, and I let the general know, hey, you just need to understand, I think this is unconstitutional for a number of different reasons. It's bad for the mission, it's bad for good order and discipline. I mean, all the way around, there's nothing good about this policy. And he said, well, there's nothing I can do about it, it's above my pay grade. And I said, actually, sir, it's your policy. It was created by your predecessor, and it was handed down to you, so you don't know it. You know, I mean, you know, he's commander for a year, he gets handed all these regulations, he signs off on all of them. And he really just didn't know. So this whole thing kind of comes to a head. It's a very long story I won't bore you with. Where I told him, hey, as a fighter pilot, as an officer, as a Christian, I'm not putting that thing on. So if you're going to make me leave the base to do my job, we're going to have a problem. And he said, I respect that conviction. Send me all your research. You know, you're the kind of person I need on my team, and get on over here. I need you for this you know, military mission. 2 days before I'm heading over there, I get told that I'm going to be ordered to sit in the back of the car and put the abaya and headscarf on after I land to Prince Sultan Air Base, because I was landing in one base and I was going to be stationed at another base without an airstrip. So we have a convoy of vehicles that are clearly American, dark-tinted windows in the middle of the night going from one military base to another where you're never getting out, and they're making our women sit in the back seat and put on the burqa. I mean, that is just ridiculous, you know, right? So I naively say, well, the general said he respected my conviction, so I'm a major at the time. So I naively say, you know, I'm just going to send a little note to remind them of my conviction. And I said, I sent it to his chief of staff, you know, I'll be there in a couple days, and I'm not going to make a big hoo-ha, but I understand your policy is to, you know, make everybody wear it when they get there. I plan on wearing very loose-fitting, long-sleeve, long pants, conservative clothes, landing at like 3 in the morning, you know, I'll just get in the back of the car, even though that's a stupid policy too, but I'm not, you know, and I'm not going to make any waves, I just wanted to let you know. And I thought, hey, just send the email and everything's going to be fine. Well, I'm supposed to leave on Tuesday night, and on Sunday, I get an email from the judge advocate. It's never good when you get an email from the judge advocate. There's never good things. So I get this email from the judge advocate CCing the 2-star general saying, Major McSally, it's our understanding that you are considering disobeying a lawful order. Let me tell you what the Uniform Code of Military Justice says about the implications of this decision. And I won't bother you with the rest of the email. But basically, I was going to be detained and taken up on charges at the